right, it's International Women's Day. And joining us to talk about all of this is NDP leader Claudia Chender, and we'll talk some politics, of course, as well. Claudia Chender, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Todd. Good morning.
Good morning. So, International Women's Day, and we know that politics and women, It's not been an easy ride over the years, of course. I look back on over the years, of course, Margaret Thatcher and Kim Campbell and some of those early women that served and that were recognizable at that level. But it's not always been that way, obviously, for women in politics, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite stats is that there are more men named John than women who have been elected to the Nova Scotia legislature. Mm-hmm. So we have a long way to go to keep up. But of course, we have trailblazers right here in Nova Scotia, people like Alexa McDonough,
yep,
who, paved the way in a way that was often hard and painful, but really important.
Yeah, for sure. So why do you think it's been such a challenge? What's your philosophy on that? Why has it been a challenge?
Oh, well, I think it's been a challenge because we have a society that fundamentally devalues women and their contributions. That's a pretty historical truth in the Western world. But, the theme of this year's International Women's Day is embracing equity. And I think increasingly we understand that everyone's contributions, women, non-binary folks, particularly with a lens around not just gender but race, is vitally important if we want to build the kind of world, the kind of province that everyone can thrive in. And so I think that those tides are changing. But it's an uphill battle, and there are different expectations. So, one day at a time, but certainly in our caucus, as you know, we are predominantly women and gender diverse in terms of our representation, and that's not an accident. We work hard to make sure that our party can really represent everyone's voices in the legislature, and I think we've got some good proof that we're doing that.
All right, so you feel as though that we still live in a society that devalues women here, even in Canada? You feel that's the truth?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we look at, issues that impact us all, we see that they almost always have a disproportionate impact on women. And I think, COVID and the way that we went through COVID and were impacted by it is a really good example. So, we all loved the phrase, stay the blazes home. But if you talk to organizations that work with women, particularly women fleeing violence, you'll hear from them that COVID was a terrifying time because many women were actually trapped in homes that they couldn't leave. When we look at the impacts on the economy, we saw that, we had what, one economist termed a she-cession. Mm-hmm. So the people who were financially impacted by COVID, particularly in the early period, were particularly women. And, those women in helping professions continue to be impacted when we talk about, which we do all the time, Todd, our nurses and our CCAs and our teachers. Those professions are predominantly women, made up of women and gender diverse people, and they're the ones that are kind of in the firing line. So, it's a lack of appropriate attention, I think, from policymakers, and something that we're constantly trying to remedy. So we're certainly making progress. I think, me being able to have the role that I do is testament to that. But I think we still have a long way to go.
You think that sometimes women are unfairly categorized? The adjectives are used, like we hear this, like sometimes when men are state a case and they state it aggressively, that's considered whatever, whereas women they're given a different title for adjective as to having the same behavior. And I'm not going to use the titles, unfortunately. I think we all know what they are, but is that at play?
Of course. I mean, I think your question is evidence. Everyone is nodding their head when you describe that scenario because it's one that we've all experienced. I think we still have very different cultural expectations of women than we do of men. And so I think particularly as a woman in a leadership role, that's something we constantly have to attend to, how our voices are heard and how our message is received. Because, of course, there are many of us, and myself included, who rely on being able to communicate an important message. That's the work we do in the world. And so I think that's much harder for women. And so I think, one way to do that is to elevate the voices that we think are important and want to hear, and to make space for them. And so I think we're doing that. I think, we see that, in my workplace, in the legislature, we certainly see more and more women, which is excellent. And I think we're seeing that in general. But as I said, I think we also still have a long way to go.
All right. So, what can be done to get women more involved when it comes to at the nomination level, and to have women step forward and want to run in politics? Is there something that governments can do, or political parties can do, or we as a society can do, or business leaders can do? What collectively can be done in order to make that happen?
Oh, yeah, there's lots we can do. And as I said, I think our party is a great example. It's not magic and it's not rocket science. You have to have processes that ensure that women and racialized people and gender diverse folks and all kinds of diversity is not just welcomed, but is prioritized in your search process. Because people who understand that and believe that they can run and achieve, those people are not hard to attract. Those people, you'll be able to find. But the people who face more barriers will be harder to find and need more of an effort to find them. So I think that, that's the answer at the party level. I think actually we've cracked that code. So, if any other parties are interested, they can certainly come talk to us about it. But I think, at the political level, it's slightly more complicated. One of the things we were that was a bit of a shame is that in the recent kind of required report on MLA remuneration, which was rejected by the Houston government legislatively, a big piece of that was looking actually at equity in politics. And so there were recommendations in there for things like childcare, for things for attention to what would make it easier for different kinds of folks to be able to represent their communities in the legislature. And that, I think, is still a very live question. We've proposed lots of solutions to that question. So one is a legislative calendar. We're the only province in the country that doesn't know when we're going to the legislature. We get 30 days notice, and there we are. That's problematic for a woman who tend to be the main childcare providers, who tend to do those kind of logistics. My family just has to be on notice that, for 2 to 3 months of the year, it probably should be longer, to be honest, if we're being the right kind of representatives for our communities, but we don't sit very long here. I disappear. And I get 30 days to figure out how that's going to work. I get 30 days to figure out how my kids are going to get to soccer, how the lunches are going to get made. And I have an incredibly supportive partner, so I'm very lucky, but lots of people don't. Yeah. And those seem like little things, but they're not little things. They're big things. And they're things that we talk to prospective candidates about all the time.
Yeah, and we hear about stories about people in the workplace who want to obviously climb the corporate ladder or whatever it might be, and they end up for going through the process of having a child and going on maternity leave, and just things aren't the same when they come back, and although it's hard to prove things changed legally or whatever it might be, it's just the employer, for whatever reason, decides to kind of shuffle that person out of their trajectory that they were on before. Have you heard these stories? I'm sure you have, eh? Oh, of course. It happens in every sector. And I think, and this is sort of to the beginning of our conversation, these
kind of cultural mores are still very much alive, in Nova Scotia and in most places. So, the expectation, Todd, is that if you're in a leadership position, you have a partner at home not working who is taking care of everything else in your life. Because at one time, that was predominantly true. Mm-hmm. And now, for most women, and I would argue for a lot of men, that's not true. And so, but our expectations of people and our systems have not evolved yet to acknowledge that. And so this is why so much of the policy we work on is so important. So for instance, we have always advocated for truly affordable universal childcare. Now, apparently we're on the road, although we're definitely really falling short this year. Yep, but these are the things that make a material difference in people's lives and allow them to work and to make the contributions outside the home that they want to make. For many people, without that, they can't. They don't have that choice.
Yeah, and to that, this story this morning, daycare operators in Nova Scotia say they're not surprised that the province failed to meet its self-imposed target of creating 1,500 new daycare spots by the end of 2022. So this is it ties in, dovetails into what you're talking about, right? Absolutely.
And that's a question of priorities. We're going to see a budget from the Houston government on March 23rd, and that's going to show kind of where the priority is. Now, we know that priority will be healthcare. We're all prepped for that. But, what else are we talking about? We have a commitment to affordable childcare. They're falling down. We're not seeing it. And that's going to have a direct impact on the already intense labor force issues that we're facing in this province. We have a commitment to, a roadmap for people with disabilities so that they can also kind of contribute and be appropriately housed. We're falling short on that. And housing in general and the cost of living, there's so much more we can do to support people in having a stable situation in their lives, the social determinants of health, we call it. We talk to women all the time who are in such a precarious circumstance that they can't have a job. They can't contribute. They want to, but they can't. And that's a policy failure. That's a failure of government to create the conditions so that people can thrive in this province. So, as you know, that's a huge amount of our focus and certainly will be going into the legislature.
Claudia, I appreciate your time. Enjoy your International Women's Day. Thanks for doing this today.
Thank you.